Why does everyone hate Rachel Zegler all of a sudden? She's a really strong singer and a talented performer, and she's starring in the new Snow White movie? I don't know, could it be related to the fact that she's a person with opinions in an internet culture where no woman can have a regular opinion without being ridiculed online relentlessly for views and clicks due to inherent sexism and subconscious hatred, coupled with the fact that this is a woman of color leading a big-budget Disney movie that frankly no one asked for? I don't know. Unfortunately, in my opinion, online film discourse has gotten out of control. I think the toxicity has really boiled over with film discourse because of how quick and how online everything is nowadays. It's not enough for you to say that you don't like a movie or you like a movie. You have to make an entire video essay why this movie is the worst thing that you've ever seen in your entire life, and anybody who likes it should go die. People can just feel so strongly about things so quickly nowadays because of the internet, which I'm not trying to sound like some old goofy goober. I'm just saying that like film discourse has gotten so violent and so toxic. It's one thing to criticize a film, it's another thing to prey on a film's downfall, especially if you even haven't seen the movie yet. But it's safe to say, thank goodness we're not having any of that hateful, vitriolic, disappointing hate.
Rachel Zegler is extraordinarily woke, but she's woke in a way that's quite deranged.
No one on the right side of America can stand the star of this movie.
But you don't seemingly like your own character, so she comes off as an insufferable, whiny brat.
The star, Rachel Zegler, is unbelievably charmless in public.
She was, as woke as they are.
She just sounds bitter and angry.
I don't think they're going to buy it. I don't think they're going to watch it. I don't think they're going to like it.
Every time she speaks, she gets less likable.
This truly is the worst casting, maybe, in the history of the film industry.
I like Snow White. I thought it was fine. It's good. I can understand criticism, but this doesn't feel like criticism. It just feels like pure, unadulterated hatred for no real good reason. And that's what today's video is all about. Today, I want to discuss why the Snow White movie has become so controversial to people and whether or not some of those criticisms and claims are valid. Spoiler alert. Well, it's nuanced. We'll get into it. The first thing that I want to say before I start talking about this movie and the hate that it got is something that I like to say to myself in most scenarios. If you're looking for a problem, you're going to find a problem. Sounds kind of basic, but let me explain. If you're going into something already expecting to hate this, or find this terrible, or be disappointed by this, if you're looking for that problem, you're going to find a reason to have a problem. If you're going into a movie or a show with some preconceived notion of, I'm going to dislike this, then yeah, you're probably gonna dislike it. Do you know how many movies that I've gotten to see just because I was open-minded and being like, fine, I'm not really a fantasy person, but I'll watch Avatar, and then loved it? It just feels like no one's willing to talk or communicate anymore. It's just these rabid headlines that are just meant to piss somebody off. They're movies. You like it? Great. You don't? That's fine. There is 1.5 billion other people that could love this movie. You don't have to like or dislike anything. It's all up to you. It's entertainment. But the idea of dragging somebody else down because they enjoy it or telling other people that they shouldn't enjoy it is ridiculous. Anyways, that's just stuff that I needed to say. Just remember some of those things so that when I start talking about it throughout the video, you'll know what I'm referring to. Anyways, let's get into this movie.
Did I frighten you?
Snow White was directed by Mark Webb and was released about a week ago to thunderous hate. I understand that the main criticism that this movie got really early on was the fact that it is another Disney live-action remake. Disney live-action remakes have become sort of controversial just because there's not really much of a purpose of existing outside of the fact of, hey, isn't it cool that this looks real now?
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
And to me, I think that just because something is made into a live action, whether it's based off of a book, a comic book, a video game, whatever, doesn't justify the original's existence. That said, there's a lot of opportunity, and it's very particular. Particularly with Disney, there's a lot of those kinds of movies, and they're not all beloved, especially by me. I wasn't much of a fan of the new Lion King movie, or the 2019 one for that matter. But that's fine, it just wasn't for me. That said, I do love The Jungle Book, Christopher Robin, Cruella, what else? Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. Those movies went hard, and I really appreciate it because you have movies like Cruella, Chip and Dale, and Christopher Robin, which are very original ideas based off of those original cartoons. But then you have something like The Jungle Book, which is pretty accurate to the original cartoon, except it's like this magnificent viewing experience because it's in live action and it's the CGI wonderland. It's, again, very nuanced. But that said, summing up this entire point of criticism that this movie got, I wanted to mention that the question of whether it should exist is very reasonable. Rarely does it feel like they should exist, especially with a Disney live-action remake coming out next year that is based off of a movie that's not even 10 years old. What are we doing here, guys? But Snow White? Yeah, it kind of makes sense. Many different movie studios have already made their own versions of the Snow White story for varying levels of success. And her movie for Disney was in 1937. That's almost 100 years of storytelling and new ideas and new music and stuff being brought up that could be added to this new version. Now, whether or not that makes it a live-action remake, not my monkey, not my circus, to be frank. So Snow White in a live-action format can work, but does it? Well, if you're a neckbeard, no, it never was going to work. But if you're a normal human being with an open mind, maybe. In order to talk about why these louder, vitriolic, overly cruel reviews are not very good for film discourse online, I need to present my own fair and thought-out thoughts on this movie. Rachel Zegler is the perfect casting for Snow White. She can sing, she can dance, she can act, and it's all great. Don't worry, we'll get into her later. One of the benefits of this being a reboot was that they could create new music based off of and inspired from the original movie. I loved the new music, and I loved the classic music. My favorite has to be Hi Ho. I was bopping to that song in the theater. And yeah, there were some problems with it. I loved the costumes, but it looked very musical theater-y, and I think that's what they were going for, so I didn't have a problem with it, but I understand that criticism. Gal Gadot's Evil Queen was sort of declawed in the final version. Again, just because we're going to talk about some of these vitriolic opinions, we'll get to it in a bit. I was surprised to like the Dwarves as much as I did. I loved Jeremy Swift, I loved Andrew Barth Feldman, Titus Burgess, and George Salazar, who voiced some of the Dwarves. It took a moment for me to get used to the CGI Dwarves, but after I did, I was having a good time. They look good throughout the movie. There's not a moment where I was like, oh, that CGI's kind of rocky. It looked perfect all throughout. Again, I'm gonna say it again, we'll talk about it in a minute. One thing that's not a compliment nor criticism towards the movie is that the prince is updated to a more exciting character, which is like this thief that's trying to be a good person. He's kind of like Robin Hood in a weird way. However, it unfortunately and unintentionally turned him into just being Flynn Rider in live action. I don't have a problem with it, but I just went into this movie looking for a good time, so I liked his character. I thought it was a good update. Overall, I think it's great. I think it's a perfect movie for its target audience, which is not 30-year-old neckbeards who actively are trying to make it sound like Snow White was for them. No, this movie theater that I was in was filled with kids and their parents and their families, and they all sounded like they had a good time, so this is a success in my book. The point I'm trying to make by saying my opinions is that there is a way to pull off film discourse where you can talk about the positives and you can also talk about the negatives, and you can even joke about the positives or make fun of the negatives or whatever. There are problems with the movie, but the loudest criticisms online unfortunately seem to be from people who went into this movie looking for a problem. They had preconceived opinions of this movie that were already negative, and now they're telling everyone, see, I was right. Are these criticisms fair, or are they just clickbait? Or both? Let's take a look by getting into the reasons why Snow White... I don't know why I did that. Why Snow White is so controversial. That's why I did that. I already mentioned this problem at the top, but in the grand scheme of Snow White's problems, it being a live-action film was at least substantial at the very beginning. But the reason why I bring this up is I want to acknowledge this criticism because it was a major criticism at the very beginning when this movie was announced several years ago, but can say that that doesn't automatically make the movie bad.
Makes no sense to me.
But, you're
progressive in one way, but you're still making that backward story of 7 dwarves living in a cave. What the f*** are you doing, man? Have I done nothing to advance the cause from my soapbox? I guess I'm not loud enough. I don't know what studio that is, but they were so proud of that, and all love and respect to the actress and to the people who thought they were doing the right thing. But I'm just like, what are you doing?
What he says in the interview, if I'm not mistaken, is that Disney will act woke and pretend it's for equality and togetherness, but then when it comes to the Snow White remake, turn around and do the exact opposite of that when it comes to little people. Little people in media are sometimes portrayed to be these like magical creatures and whatnot instead of being people. And Snow White is unintentionally perpetuating that stereotype even further. So it makes sense that when this live-action reboot was announced, famous actor and also a little person, Peter Dinklage, would raise a concern with that. It's not like Disney wants to be mean or harmful in any way. They just wanted to retell this story of Snow White.
And then we got photos of what was going on with Snow White during filming, and we got a look at the 7 dwarves, except they weren't the 7 dwarves anymore. They were the 7 magical creatures, or as I like to refer to them, the 7 magical diversity hires.
Now the film, the film commits some literal microaggressions, you might say.
Do you see 7 dwarves here? Well, Disney wants you to see 7 magical creatures instead. Promotional images leaked showing a gaggle of differently sized acolytes of a range of races and genders dressed in a hodgepodge of costumery.
We have CGI dwarves now.
Okay, yeah, because little people didn't need jobs either.
Yeah,
but it's
Peter Dinklage wanted the whole field to himself. Yep. Went out there and was like,
ladder down
"This
behind
is insulting, unless it's me."
He kicked the ladder.
Yeah, he got his money in Hollywood. Now he's like, "Don't
nicely
hire
done, Smug."
Else.
The ladder.
That was nicely done.
That was low.
Like I said, I don't mind the dwarves at all. I think they look great, and they're not that big of a deal. That said, now Disney has taken away jobs from little people. I really like this take that I found online.
They're remaking the movie. They just got rid of the dwarves. Okay,
but what do they call them?
Why would they get rid of the dwarves, though?
Magical creatures.
But they have one token dwarf amongst these magical creatures. You actually just went backwards. You actually just erased the dwarfism side of it, the disability, like we're a disability group. You just erase that whole image. The argument should have been from Peter Dinklage. There's power of being on TV. There's power of television. And to put 7 people with dwarfism on camera in a major Disney movie, there's still power there. If the story is offensive, change the story. Don't change the characters.
Disney was already open to changing the story. They shouldn't just delete them. Mirror Mirror is a great Snow White remake in my opinion, and it pulled it off the right way, if I remember correctly. I also want to point out that I've seen a few fans try and blame Peter Dinklage for this, which is ridiculous. I feel like they needed to have more of a conversation about this problem rather than moving forward with a different plan immediately.
And enough champagne to fill the Nile.
Okay, there are 2 really big points of criticism when it comes to Gal Gadot, and one of them is a minefield of a conversation. The first problem is that people think that she's simply a bad actress. If you want to criticize her for that, that's fine, to be frank. It's a little bit mean, but, that's film criticism. I do think that some people are taking it a bit too far, but I understand simply disliking her performance in the movie. I felt her character lost a lot of her grit due to it being in live action, and you don't have the benefit of really milking how terrifying and creepy the animation can really take her character. The other big issue with her, however, is her political views. I am not going to get into this situation, particularly because this is not a conversation that should be had in the middle of a video about the new Snow White movie. And I mean, she already has this really bad reputation from her acting and also the Imagine video from 2020.
Imagine there's no heaven.
Now, don't get me wrong, she has nothing compared to the absolute cruel smear campaign that has been thrusted upon Snow White's main star.
My name, Snow White's up there, and I cried my eyes out.
People hate Rachel Zegler.
Mirror, mirror on the wall, how badly did Disney's new Snow White flop after all?
And bring that dream to you.
The most generic, reheated pop music slop imaginable.
The Snow White live-action remake was, without a doubt, one of the worst ideas in the whole history of entertainment.
A new trailer is out for Snow White, and if you thought that Disney was going to salvage this film after all the backlash that it received about the direction it was going in remaking the 1937 classic, you were wrong.
Oh my goodness! For no reason! She's talented and she has opinions. That's why people are upset. Genuinely.
We all know, I haven't seen it yet, but I would lay even money the moment Prince Charming moves in for the kiss while she's asleep, he gets arrested.
Yeah, exactly. Immediately.
Again, there are two big reasons why audiences have a problem with Rachel Zegler. The first is that Rachel Zegler isn't white.
$300 million. It's Snow. They should have just called it Snow.
By the way,
slightly tanned.
Snow White gets her name not from the fairness of her skin, as we obviously know. Rachel Zegler would be a miscast in that sense.
So, I think there are times where audiences can create a conversation or an argument on why race swapping isn't necessary, or at least for specific stories, or it doesn't matter. Personally, I think it's always based off of talent, and I've never seen a race swap, or at least a accidental, or it doesn't matter. I've never seen somebody's... This is weird to talk about because it's not that big of a deal to me.
Although, f*** me, they must have pretty good transportation links with the rest of the world because the population here is more ethnically diverse than central London.
If you have a problem with it, you do it. You know, you do it. You go make a Snow White movie based off of the original thing. Yeah, you go do it.
Once upon a time, but now that time is gone.
No, I didn't actually mean you go do it. I'm sorry. I hate to derail this, but when the people at Daily Wire heard that Rachel Zegler wanted to change the original story, as she said that the original Snow White was outdated and even suggested that the prince was depicted as a guy who literally stalks her, they decided to make their own Snow White movie.
At least Brett Cooper looks like Snow White in this promo, whereas you can't really say the same thing about Rachel Zegler.
So we got the idea for it literally the day that Rachel Zegler did an interview in which she said that she hated the original Snow White and wanted to rip the guts out of it. And then Disney released those ridiculous cast photos of dwarves that were not dwarves, the multiracial, multi-ethnic, tall people and one dwarf. And it was at that point that this is how we make decisions at the Daily Wire. I literally just emailed that to my business partner, Jeremy Boring, and I was like, we should do something like this. And Jeremy's like, okay, we're just gonna make Snow White.
It got canceled. Yeah, Brett Cooper left the company, there's drama. Who cares? Daily Wire is such a hateful media company already. Don't even look them up. You don't deserve the targeted ads I've been subjected to. Either way, I needed to mention this because a literal Snow White movie was made in spite of Rachel Zegler. The movie was only announced, and these sons of guns created and made an entire retaliatory movie. My God. Moving on, the other big reason as to why Rachel Zegler is getting hate is because she has opinions. I was gonna give a whole speech as to why this is a stupid point of criticism, but it just ended up being, do I need to explain why it's not bad?
I braved a bitter storm of snow.
Her father and mother are king and queen to a utopian communist society. I'm not joking, guys. Everybody shares and is mindful of what each person is getting, and we spread our resources evenly, which is where this idea of fairness as Snow White is the fairest of them all is really presented in the film. Snow White is the fairest of them all because she has these communist sensibilities.
What? I feel like half of these criticisms that I've brought up are, as I've said, just people looking for a problem, and they found it. When it comes to other movies that get a lot of negative reviews, most of the time it feels like people are going in, watching it, and then afterward being like, I didn't like that, thumbs down. That makes sense to me. But when it comes to movies like Snow White, it doesn't feel like people are going in with an open mind. It feels like they're going in with these negative impressions already, and then confirmation bias is confirming to them that, yes, I'm right. Now, I also want to mention that this movie is bombing at the box office. I'm not blaming these opinions for that. And I'm also not saying that anyone has to like this movie. I'm just saying that there are genuine criticisms and then there are cruel and unusual insults from people all over online. In conclusion, if you're interested in seeing Snow White, go for it. It's a lot of fun, in my opinion. And if you don't like it, that's completely fine. That is perfectly normal. One of my favorite parts about movies is that when you watch it with friends or family, or maybe you watch it on your own, you can talk to people about it. You can discuss your favorite parts, or the parts that you thought were stupid, or the parts that you thought were hilarious or dumb, or it doesn't matter. That's what's so enjoyable about film discourse. Hey, you see this thing? These are my thoughts. I thought it was crazy. Wow, I agree. I disagree. Stuff like that. It can be so fulfilling. And these people that I've discussed have made it exhausting. These hate campaigns, whether born out of reasonable to ridiculous film criticisms, have gotten so out of control. And it's just a simple Disney princess live-action movie. It's not that crazy, and yet it's become the political hotspot of the century. I just felt like I needed to say something, especially because I talk about movies so often on this channel, and I did genuinely enjoy Snow White. And I guess at the end I'll just say this: I hope nobody was offended or disappointed by anything I said. I don't want anyone to have hurt feelings about this. I'm just saying I think we can have a more open mind to movies, whether you think things beforehand or not. But go into it, just have a good time. If you don't have a good time, that's okay too. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.